Hello everyone, Nerdy Steve here, and today I wanted to talk about this Esper Greasefang Parhelion combo deck in Explorer, and really wanted to share the process I use when building a deck, refining a deck, and what goes into my decisions in changing it. And I figured that would be fun to talk about, so let's do it. The first thing I do when making a deck is you need to understand what the deck is trying to do. And this Parhelion combo deck is well known and everyone kind of knows what it does, right? You want a Parhelion in the graveyard, which is a 5/5 vehicle that when it attacks creates 2 4/4 angel tokens. And then you have Greasefang Okiba Boss, which is a creature that when it's on the battlefield, it can reanimate a vehicle, which will be Parhelion, and attack for a lot. And ideally, you can do this as early as turn 3, and it is a very, very devastating combo that can fight through a lot of removal and can kill your opponent very, very, very quickly. So, the basic skeleton of the deck has already been created, right? Lots of people have different versions of this deck. And so I wanted to talk about how I came to this specific version and what I might change in the future and how I can develop it, and maybe it will inform you how you can do maybe similar stuff with your deck building. I do want to add here that I have a very specific style of deck building and playing that is important to consider when I talk about my choices, right? And that style is I will, in general, try to get more singleton copies or 2 copies of a card in a deck than maybe other players would like or other deck designers would do. So, in a lot of ways, I'm kind of sacrificing consistency in some ways, but that's because not only do I enjoy diverse cards a little more, and it helps me keep myself engaged when I'm playing, but I also like having that variety of options. So the variety of options does come at a cost of the consistency of having everything be a 4 of. And you can see that in this deck, and I'll go into my choices later on. But I think that is a very, very important thing to understand, and that this deck and this version of this deck really appeal to my sense as a player. And I think that's really important because a lot of times people will pick up a deck and not understand why certain choices were made or why a card is here versus another card. And for me, if you're looking at something that I have built or I have refined or I have, made a couple changes to, that sense of diversity in the deck building is probably going to help you understand why I did certain things. And I think that's just a general important thing when you look at someone's deck building process. So I wanted to put that out there because now I'm going to talk about the deck, right? So in addition to Parhelion and Greasefang, which are the namesake cards, the reason why I am Esper in this specific version are Ledger Shredder and Raffine Scheming Seer. And these 2 cards do 2 very, very important things that really, really make the deck work together. The first is they apply pressure on their own. Ledger Shredder will naturally get bigger as you cast multiple spells a turn, as your opponent casts multiple spells a turn, and Raffine also, every time you attack, a creature is conniving and getting bigger and bigger. So these 2 creatures can apply a lethal threat to your opponent without ever venturing into your combo territory. And that is important because it's making your opponent having to decide, oh, do I deal and use my mana on the Ledger Shredder or Raffine, or wait to stop the opponent's combo and kill Greasefang, right? But in addition to that plan B of attacking with these really, really big flyers, while they are applying a clock to your opponent, they are also looting, right? You are conniving and drawing cards and discarding cards. And also, by the way, Parhelion doesn't do anything really when it's in your hand. You need it in your graveyard. So Ledger Shredder and Raffine are facilitating that combo. Not only are you finding your Greasefang and your Parhelion, you're allowed to discard your Parhelion, right? So you are getting the card selection that you need to find your 2-card combo while also providing a threat, right? And so that's why these cards are very, very important and integral to this deck. And then we also have Tainted Indulgence, which is a draw 2 cards and discard a card, along with Faithful Mending that I have. And these 2 cards are way to, like the Connive from Ledger Shredder and Raffine, they get the Parhelion out of your hand into your graveyard. So, and you need to do that, otherwise your Greasefang isn't going to do anything. A turn 3 Greasefang with no vehicle in your graveyard is a sad Greasefang. But what is really, really amazing about Faithful Mending and Tainted Indulgence is, at the end of your opponent's turn, if you have 2 mana, you can Faithful Mending or Tainted Indulgence to discard a Parhelion and put into your graveyard. But you're also drawing 2 cards, which can reliably find you a Greasefang to turn 3 cast it and reanimate Parhelion. And that is just something that is so backbreaking, and where a lot of the power of this deck comes from, is it forces your opponent to be very, very afraid of this early, really powerful combo, and a lot of their mulligans, or how they play the first couple of turns, will be with this ability in mind, right? And so that's why these 2 cards are in here, and they're really, really good. Then we also have Consider, which is another way to find Parhelion and put into your graveyard. It's not going to happen a lot, but there have been times where I've had a Greasefang out on the battlefield, and I have considered a Parhelion into the graveyard, and won there, right? But Consider also does another interesting thing with Ledger Shredder, in that this deck doesn't necessarily cast a lot of spells in a single turn, and Consider is one of the few times where you can Ledger Shredder, then cast Consider to get that Connive trigger from Ledger Shredder. And it's something that, you know, you just want to consider and be aware of. And sometimes you want to hold off on Consider to trigger that ability from Ledger Shredder. Then we also have Can't Stay Away and Sorin, kind of fulfill a very similar role in that they can reanimate Greasefang. They can also reanimate the other creatures too, but they mainly they're mainly here for Greasefang, right? And one of the interesting things about Greasefang, right, is how Magic works and priority works is, once you go, during your main phase, you then go to your combat phase, right? And this gives your opponent an ability to remove the Greasefang. If your opponent doesn't, the Greasefang will trigger during your combat step, and you get to bring in Parhelion. So your opponent has to remove Greasefang during your main phase. But if your opponent does kill Greasefang during your main phase, you get priority again, which means you have the ability to then cast another Greasefang, or cast a Can't Stay Away to then have a Greasefang during your combat step. And there have been times where I've had a Greasefang in my main phase, my opponent has killed it, I got priority again, I activated a Sorin to bring Greasefang back, my opponent then killed Greasefang, and then I've activated or cast a Can't Stay Away to bring back Greasefang, right? And then I'm able to attack with Parhelion. And that's where a lot of this power from Sorin and Can't Stay Away come from, in that they add a lot of resilience to this combo. And your opponent really has to weigh in, okay, now I need, instead of one removal, I need multiple removal, right? And then we have Kaito here, which is in general a very, very good and useful card. In certain matchups, Kaito can come out on the third turn, and on its own, you create a ninja, and then you just draw cards and bury your opponent in the card advantage that it generates. But importantly, too, the +1 ability, you can do it before you attack. A lot of people, you want to wait till after you attack to draw a card and it be, you know, card advantage. But sometimes you just want to loot with Kaito, discard your Parhelion, and maybe you can find Greasefang and reanimate it that turn. Which, you know, is something that actually is very, very common. And that's where Kaito's flexibility plays really, really well. And then we have Thoughtseize, which is really, really good way to interact with your opponent on the first couple turns. This deck doesn't really have a lot to do on turn 1, and Thoughtseize really, really helps fulfill that role. And it can also remove problematic cards from your opponent's hand that might kill you before you can get your combo going out, or stop you from comboing anyway, like maybe you can discard a Rest in Peace or an Unlicensed Hearse, right? And so Thoughtseize does something really, really wonderful there. And then finally, the last card we will talk about is Fatal Push. Again, Fatal Push is there for some very, very cheap interaction, and there's really nothing more to be said about it. It can... Again, this deck, it needs to survive a couple turns for it to get going, and sometimes you don't have Greasefang on the third or fourth turn, and you need to survive before your connive cards can find what you need to win, right? And so that's why Fatal Push is there. And with that, I want to change scenes a little bit, and we'll go over some more general card choices and about the sideboard. You will notice this huge pile of cards here, and I'm going to talk about them because they have kind of been in my peripheral as other options that I want in the deck, or cards that in my sideboard that I am constantly thinking of or reminded, and like potentially bad matchups or problematic cards, right? So first, before we talk about that specifically, I want to talk about the number of stuff I have, or the numbers going on in my main deck, right? So, I talked about how I like Sorin and Can't Stay Away, but I have 1 and 1, why not 2? And they both have their interesting decisions on why I would want one or the other, right? Can't Stay Away is really cool with Faithful Mending and Tainted Indulgence, because you can discard it, and you still have something you can cast down the line, right? And Sorin, sometimes having a Sorin out with Raffine, right? You can just have a really huge Raffine that is lifelinking and attacking for more and more each turn, and it is almost impossible for an aggro deck that maybe took 1 or 2 turns off, or like stalled a little bit, to ever compete with you, because now you've gained so much life and they cannot kill you. Like, the lifelink ability is surprisingly relevant in addition to the reanimating part. But Sorin also does a very, very interesting at being 4 mana, and it being in the discard pile for Tainted Indulgence has drawn me many 2 cards instead of 1 many times, right? And so that's why I have them here. I don't want 2 Sorin because Sorin's a little too expensive for the deck, but I also don't not want Sorin, right? So that's why I have 1 of each. And kind of like the same for Kaito and Faithful Mending, like they seem very, very different, but they're kind of actually fighting for the same spot in a way. Like, the looting is very, very important, and the gaining life can be equivalent to the chump blocker that the ninja gives you, or the damage that Kaito would soak up. The reason, again, I'm not at 4 Kaito is I found it to be 3 mana's kind of expensive, and I found it to be marginally cumbersome and not and a little bit clunky, and so I've never really wanted more Kaito in my deck, but I also never really feel like I want more than 2 Faithful Mendings. It's usually one of the cards I side out the most, and it's not because Faithful Mending is bad, it's just usually in post-sideboard games there are other options that I like more. And so I just wanted to talk about that before we venture into these specific card choices. So I want to talk about Takenuma and Raffine's Tower. I have no Raffine's Tower in the main deck, and it's something I'm thinking about wanting maybe 1 or 2 of to really help the mana be a little more consistent. However, I haven't been so drawn to it yet. We do loot a lot, or connive a lot, and so our deck is usually very, very consistent mana-wise. However, I did bring up that we don't usually do a lot of things on turn 1, so Raffine's Tower turn 1 isn't really going to set us back, but a lot of the times we do need an untapped land later on, where Raffine's Tower can be very, very, very detrimental. Now, you'll also notice we have Hive of the Eye Tyrant, though, main deck. Why Hive over Raffine's Tower? And that's because I found the creature land and graveyard interaction to be very, very relevant, but I think that might be the switch I would possibly make. Again, I don't really know, but it's something that I haven't felt the need to include, but it is something that I am constantly thinking of, specifically whenever I get, the wrong mana. And then I also have Takenuma, which, again, I don't have in my deck. I have Otawara, which, I really like because it can deal with these problematic permanents, like a Rest in Peace if you need to get it off the board for a turn, or, an uncounterable removal spell, right? But Takenuma can mill you, so you can mill a Parhelion and a Greasefang, and then bring back a Greasefang, and then cast it and win, so why not include Takenuma? It seems like a really, really easy choice. And the thing is, I'm considering it. I haven't included it yet, because I kind of like where everything is at, but it's a possibility for me to play with in the future. But again, I don't know what I would take out. I really like the Hive of the Eye Tyrant. I really like having at least 1 basic swamp. There are decks that, can take advantage of you not having basics, and I really, really like it. But it's something that maybe the benefit outweighs the negative, right? So that is something, to consider. I also want to bring up, I've seen versions of this deck with Raffine's Informant and Seasoned Hollowblade, and I like those because these are 2 creatures that help loot, but they also work really well with Raffine, right? So if we're going on that plan where, hey, maybe we just want to be aggressive and have this combo, having these creatures that can help you loot and discard and find that combo while applying pressure would be really, really good. And again, they really make Raffine that much more powerful when you have a 2-drop other than just Ledger Shredder. However, for me, they never felt good enough or worth it, and they're not as good in this deck to draw late game as any other card, so that's why I don't love it. And I also want to bring up Portable Hole too. I have Fatal Push in the main deck, but one of the problems with Fatal Push is we do not have a consistent way to trigger Revolt, right? And so there are times where you really, really need to remove something that costs a creature that costs 3 or 4 mana, and Fatal Push is just staring at your hand, going, I'm not doing anything for you. And Portable Hole, while it doesn't kill, 3 or 4 mana things, it does interact with things that Fatal Push can't, like Trail of Crumbs or opposing Portable Holes, right? So it is a removal spell that is very, very consistent in what it does as opposed to Fatal Push. A more apt comparison to Fatal Push maybe would be, March of the Otherworldly Light or Vanishing Verse, which are other removal spells I've considered main deck, right? Vanishing Verse can deal with a lot of problematic permanents that Fatal Push can never dream of doing, even if you could trigger Revolt very, very consistently, right? Dealing with opposing... I have Elder Gargaroth here, because Elder Gargaroth is a card that I've been seeing a lot more lately, and it is a creature that, if you get your Parhelion combo, great, it's really, really good. But you attack with Parhelion, your opponent blocks an angel that it creates with a 6/6 creature, can gain 3 life, and then can attack back, and your Parhelion doesn't do anything against an Elder Gargaroth. It is very, very bad, and I've been actively considering more removal to interact with Elder Gargaroth because I've been facing it a lot more. And that's why, Vanishing Verse is another potential decision or thing to include maybe over Fatal Push. And then we also have March of the Otherworldly Light, which is very similar to Portable Hole and Fatal Push in that it's very, very cheap removal, but the thing is, it's not really consistently cheap, right? Because, 1 mana isn't that much, but 2 mana to kill something is a lot, right? And I've thought of maybe putting March in the sideboard because, again, March can kill things that Vanishing Verse can't, right? But I haven't felt the need for it a lot lately, but it is something I'm considering. I'm considering a lot of alternatives to Fatal Push, and so what you're seeing in the metagame and what you're going against might change what you want to do, but those are things that, I'm just actively aware of. And I want to talk about, I talked about Elder Gargaroth being really good against our deck, but also Narset, part of Veils, is really good against us. If your opponent has Narset, and you attack with a Raffine, guess what? You are just discarding cards to connive. You are not drawing anything. And that can be a huge problem, right? And so Narset cannot be Fatal Pushed, but Narset can be Vanishing Verse and March, right? So it's just something to be aware of, and if you're facing more Narsets, maybe those are things you might want, right? I also want to talk about Rest in Peace and Unlicensed Hearse as cards that are really, really good against us. Graveyard removal, very, very powerful, right? Because we can't then reanimate our Parhelion. Now, the good thing is we have a really good plan B in that with Ledger Shredder and Raffine, we can normally attack and kill opponents through this graveyard removal and graveyard interaction. However, just because we can doesn't mean we want to, right? Unlicensed Hearse and Rest in Peace turn off so much of the power of our deck. And again, Fatal Push cannot interact with those cards. March can. Vanishing Verse cannot interact with Hearse, but can with Rest in Peace, right? So, again, that's why I'm saying, this play and dance between different removal is something that you might want to consider and think about, and what you're seeing on the ladder, and, what you might like. This is what's working for me right now, but I just want to reiterate, and this is why I'm talking about this. And then I've also seen Charter Course in the main deck as opposed to maybe Faithful Mending, which is something I've considered specifically where a more aggressive strategy, but I think the instant speed of Faithful Mending just wins out a little bit for me in addition to the flashback. Charter Course just wasn't always good enough for me, but it is something, again, I am potentially considering. I also have Sky Sovereign here. Our deck only has 4 Parhelion main deck, right? So 4 vehicles that you can reanimate with Greasefang isn't really a lot. And Sky Sovereign is something a lot of lists have main deck. For me, I haven't felt I needed it, mainly because we have, with the Esper deck, we are going through our library so much and we're able to find the Parhelion pretty consistently. But it is something that I think about a lot. It's also a 5-mana card, which helps with Tainted Indulgence if you want to activate the 5 or more different mana values. So that is a really huge benefit, actually, to including it. Sky Sovereign is also good against a more control format, or a format not necessarily controlled, where you're seeing a lot of Planeswalkers. Being able to deal 3 damage to a Planeswalker is very, very powerful, because it can often kill them. Like, you can play Sky Sovereign pre-combat to kill a Narset, and then you can connive with your Raffine very freely, and I've done that multiple times. I have it in my sideboard, but it is something that I've thought about including it in the main deck. And I'm going to talk about my sideboard here, but one of the interesting things that I've seen on the ladder, and some people, is they have kind of a transformative sideboard where in games 2 and 3 they go into a more control build and kind of move away from Parhelion and Greasefang completely, or mostly. And I think that is not something I've really experimented with a lot, but I do see a lot of benefits to that, because that means your opponent's going to sideboard and bring in stuff that isn't going to be powerful against you because you're not on that game plan anymore. So it's just something to put out there. I don't know if I would recommend it, but it is something, I think it's a really, really cute and clever thing to do. And I just wanted to point that out there because it's in the back of my mind as an option down the line, right? And so now we're going to go to my actual sideboard. I've already talked about Portable Hole and Vanishing Verse, right? And the Sky Sovereign. But we have Ray of Enfeeblement as a direct way to interact with Greasefang. Again, Fatal Push isn't really good against Greasefang if you can't reliably trigger the Revolt. So that's why I have Ray of Enfeeblement in the sideboard. We have Dovin's Veto for the more control matches. Sometimes you need to really make sure you can counter an Indomitable Creativity or Teferi, because otherwise you're just going to either get buried in card advantage or whatever they get out of their deck with a Luca or Indomitable Creativity or Transmogrify, right? Duress is something where I kind of want to actually go up in the number, but the sideboard is so tight and there's not a lot of room. Again, there are so many matches where you really want Thoughtseize and Duress to interact with your opponent early on, so you can get your combo going, right? And Duress just fulfills that role. And also being able to take Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which is a very, very powerful card, really, 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 really helps. Because if you can get rid of a Fable of the Mirror Breaker, a lot of people keep hands knowing that they can loot stuff away. So, I mean, that's one of the benefits of this deck. If you have a Ledger Shredder, you can keep a hand with anything. But, so I kind of always feel like I want more discard. That's why I have Go Blank here, because it is discard and it's graveyard removal, which is powerful in certain matchups. But I'm thinking of maybe I want to go to Duress because 1 mana is much cheaper than 3, and the pinpoint removal of a card in hand is sometimes very, very important. Then I also have Unlicensed Hearse, which, again, a resolved Unlicensed Hearse can really destroy a Greasefang deck if they are not prepared to respond to it. A lot of times you can do this on turn 2, then your opponent can't do anything. They just have inefficient creatures, and they cry, right? That's also good against other random graveyard strategies. And Unlicensed Hearse has an ability called Crew 2, if you didn't know. And a lot of people really underestimate it becoming a creature. Unlicensed Hearse can become a lethal threat very, very, very quickly, right? So it is something to keep in mind in the back of your head. And it is something where even if you're playing it, you really need to be aware of Unlicensed Hearse as a threat to your opponent's life total, because a lot of people don't attack with it as often as they should. So that's also something to consider. And I also have Mystical Dispute in here for the more control matchups. But I also do want to add, Mono Blue, I've been seeing a lot on the ladder, and Mystical Dispute is really good in that matchup. So it might be something, again, I want more of, but it, as I've said many times, this deck doesn't have a lot of room. Everything, you kind of want everything in it, and so you have to fight back with, you have to cut cards that you don't want to cut. And if the sideboard had 40 choices in it, I would really, really love it. Everyone would. But it's just something that, you need to adapt and change as to what you see on the ladder, right? This is wrapping up the overview of the Greasefang Parhelion combo deck I'm using in Explorer. I hope this video was somewhat informative, somewhat entertaining, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you would like to see more of these types of videos, let me know, because I really enjoyed making it. But yeah, I just want to say thank you for watching. You can watch me play this deck live and many other decks at twitch.tv/thenerdysteve. You should also totally like, comment, or subscribe to this video and channel. And yeah, I just want to, again, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful morning, evening, or afternoon, wherever you are. Bye.